So basically, this window function here is the first step we use to achieve this, to construct this column, all right? Like what you just did in Excel, okay? If we want to construct such a kind of similar column in Power BI, well, this window function is going to be the first step we take, all right? And we already explained what this window function is doing, all right? If we are standing at this point, okay, we're looking at IBM on September 30th, 2024. This window function is going to take the prior 4 quarters. Basically, okay, I will just highlight this with a different color. We use this kind of dark color. Okay, this is the current quarter we're looking at. All right, then the window function is going to take the window function is going to take a block of rows relative to the current row. So the current row is denoted by this colored cell here. Okay, so we're going to go 4 rows prior to the current row. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to be the first row in this window block. Okay, then the last row in this window block is going to be 1 row prior to the current row. So that's going to be this row. All right, July 30th, 2024. So basically, we're going to take these 4 rows. Okay, once we use this window function, we're basically taking these 4 rows as a block or as a new table, and this table is called W. All right, so I'm going to use a kind of light color to denote the window or the tables or the rows we're going to take relative to the current row. All right, if our current row is here, then we're going to take the prior 4 rows. The same thing will carry over. All right, so let's make this again no color. If we're standing at this row, okay, September 30th, 2023, and we're going to retrieve the prior 4 quarters, what this window function is going to do is going to retrieve these 2 rows. All right, so because the current quarter is here, the prior 4 quarters, we don't have prior 4 quarters, but at least we have the prior 2 quarters. So we're going to take data from these 2 quarters. That's going to be what's returned by this window function. That's going to be this W table, which contain these 2 rows. All right, so window function will take a look at the current row we are working on, and this current row will determine what we call the current partition. Okay, so the partition is determined by the stock symbol. If you are working on this row is related to IBM, so the current partition is the partition related to IBM, basically this golden block. All right, then within this partition, this window function is going to take 4 rows prior to the current row all the way to 1 row prior to the current row. Okay, if there's less than 4 rows prior to the current row, well, we're just taking as many as we can. All right, so in this case, there's just 2 rows prior to the current row. Okay, so the starting point, although technically speaking, the starting point has to be 4 rows prior, but if within the current partition, there's no 4 rows prior to the current row, there's only just 2 rows prior to the current row, then we're going to take as many as rows we can take relative to the current row. All right, so that's what this window function is going to do for this particular row. Then, as I said, you can move down to the next row. Then the situation will be slightly different, right? If we're moving to this row, when we are working on this row, and we ask the window function to retrieve 4 rows prior to the current row, okay, starting from 4 rows prior all the way to 1 row prior, then again, as long as our current position is here, our current row is September 30th, 2024, then the prior 4 rows is going to be those 4. All right, so when Power BI work on this data set or on this this entire data table row by row. So when we work on a particular row, we can always retrieve the prior 4 rows. All right, that's how this window function is working. It's gonna work through this entire table row by row. For each row, we're trying to retrieve the rows, the 4 rows prior to the current row. So that's gonna be the definition of what we call last year, right? The 4 quarters prior to the current row. Okay. Again, we're only taking the prior rows within the current partition, and that current partition is determined by which row you are currently working on. So if we're working on this row, row 11, we're talking about partition regarding Ford, then we're going to take just 1 row prior to this current row because, well, regarding Ford, the data is limited. If we're currently standing at July 30th, 2024, we can only have 1 prior quarter exists in this data set. All right. So we're just going to take this 1 row, and the window function is going to just return us 1 row. Okay. If we're standing at September 30th, 2024, and the window function is going to take this 2 rows prior to September 30th, 2024. Okay. Moving down here, if we're working on December 30th, 2024, the window function is going to take the prior 3 rows. Okay, again, that's the maximum number of rows we can take within the current partition. Okay. Then if we're moving to March 2025, we have actually 4 rows prior to March 2025. So the window function is going to return this 4 rows. Okay. The variable W is going to just contain these 4 rows. And now if we're looking at this row regarding June 2025, the prior 4 rows is going to be those 4, starting from June 2024 all the way to March 2025. Okay, those 4 rows are the 4 rows prior to the current row. Okay, so this is how this particular definition works. Okay, we're basically retrieving a block of rows starting from 4 rows prior to the current row all the way to 1 row prior. So very important, the window function is going to retrieve rows relative to the current row, but all the rows retrieved by window function will be located within the current partition. Window function is not going to go beyond the current partition to retrieve rows. Okay, so depending on the current row Power BI is working on, for example, if current BI is working on this row, row 20, which is related to Apple, then this current row will determine what the current partition is. The current partition will be the Apple partition, the entire green block. So if we're working on row 20, although we're asking the window function to retrieve the prior 4 rows, because the current partition only go as far as this row, row 18, okay, we can only retrieve the prior 2 rows or 2 quarters of data. Window function is not going to go beyond this row. For example, it's not going to cover this row or this row. All right. Although those 4 rows seems to be the 4 rows prior to the current row 20, but because those 2 rows is already outside the current partition, well, the window function is not going to take a look at those rows. Okay. The window function is only going to take a look at these 2 rows because these 2 rows are the only 2 rows prior to the current row, as well as within the current partition of Apple to the current row.